is very clear and starkly clear for the world that no objective was achieved by the Indians at all, because the targeted infrastructure had no linkage with the so-called terrorist infrastructure. New red lines now crossed by India without achieving any substantive result. India was following the same playbook of 2016 and 2019 Pulwama incident. Tell the world, especially Indian audience, that they are victims of cross-border terrorism and then create a perception of a justified action against it, claiming the victory and revenge fulfilled. In 2019, India launched standoff missiles from the fighter jets, which landed on top of uninhabited mountains, damaging some trees. India would then claim and celebrate so-called killing of 300 plus terrorists. By Indian playbook, they would put a rhetoric out and would then use their strong influence in the propaganda segment of the foreign media to validate their version of accounts. Even though immediately after Balakot strike, many Pakistani journalists reached the site where missiles landed and so-called terrorists were hit, but saw no signs of any damage to infrastructure or casualties. There were no reports of any injured being brought into the hospital of the nearby areas. India was now engaged to launch similar misadventure and were misguided that they would launch strikes across the border and build similar narrative and claim the victory, revenge fulfilled. Welcome to the fourth episode of Marka-e-Haq series, where we are examining the untold events during the war that took place between India and Pakistan in May 2025. I am your host Ahmad Hassan Al Arbi, and in the previous episode we analyzed the air duel of the two air forces on the night of 6th and 7th May. And in this episode we'll focus on the Indian assault on Pakistan's so-called terrorist infrastructure on same night, dubbed as Operation Sindoor, and thereafter Indian drone misadventure.
आज रात बुज़दिल भारत ने पाकिस्तान पर बिला इश्तियाल जारियत की है और मासूम लोगों को टारगेट किया है। पाकिस्तानी अफवाज पाकिस्तान के अवाम की भरपूर हमायत से इस वक्त दुश्मन की इस जारियत का मुकम्मल और भरपूर जवाब दे रही है और इसको इस जारियत का मुंह तोड़ जवाब दिया जाएगा।
The early hours of May 7, 2025 shattered the uneasy silence that had settled over South Asia ever since the Pahalgam attack, pushing Pakistan and India to the edge of an unprecedented military conflict. Immediately after the midnight, on May 6th and 7th, IAF launched Operation Sindoor, a coordinated assault on Pakistan's territory, falsely framed as prescient strikes against terrorist hideouts in Pakistan-administered Kashmir and Punjab. However, this wasn't a surprise. On 29th April, Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Asif and Information Minister Mr. Ataullah Tarar sounded the alarm, publicly warning of an imminent Indian military strike.
Pakistan has credible intelligence that India intends carrying out military action against Pakistan in the next 24 to 36 hours on the pretext of baseless and concocted allegations of involvement in the Pahalgam incident.
Citing credible intelligence and observable troop movements, they described the threat as immediate and serious, prompting Pakistan to reinforce its forward deployments and place key units on high alert. On 5th of May, Pakistani officials again reiterated the credible intelligence indicated an imminent Indian military incursion. The DGISPR condemned the strikes during a press briefing, calling out the stark gap between India's claims and on-ground reality. Contrary to New Delhi's assertions, the strikes targeted mosques, schools, and homes across multiple Pakistani cities, resulting in significant civilian casualties and infrastructural destruction. A majority of the martyred and injured were children and worshippers gathered in mosques. In Bahawalpur, Subhanala Mosque was struck in the attack, leaving 13 civilians martyred. In Muzaffarabad, Bilal Mosque suffered heavy damage, resulting in the martyrdom of 3 civilians. In Kotli, Abbas Mosque was destroyed, claiming the lives of 2 teenagers. In Mirpur, Kamar Mosque was hit, resulting in the martyrdom of 3 individuals. In Sialkot, civilian educational and health facilities sustained damages, though no casualties were reported, while in Shakargarh, a civilian dispensary area was targeted, resulting in the martyrdom of 5 civilians, including a 5-year-old little boy. India's initial strike claimed 26 civilian lives and injured 46 others, including women and children. The DGISPR condemned the attacks and categorically rejected India's so-called prescient strikes narrative, highlighting the deliberate targeting of mosques and civilian infrastructure. On the morning of May 7, 2025, international media correspondents visited sites in Kashmir, including Muzaffarabad, reporting on damage caused by Indian airstrikes dubbed Operation Sindoor. The media teams visited targeted sites, leaving no doubts in their minds that these sites had nothing to do with what India calls and what India claims. Pakistan Army, in show of their solidarity, attended funeral prayers of all innocent civilians who lost their lives as a result of this unprovoked Indian aggression. However, Indian media portrayed this as a proof of underhand collusion of Pakistan Army and so-called terrorist organization responsible for cross-border attacks.
The Indian High Commissioner in UK who is showing on international media picture of a person leading the prayers. You can see that. Now he is saying Hafiz Abdur Rauf, who is a sanctioned terrorist, and this terrorist is leading this prayer. Now he is this man. His name is Hafiz Abdur Rauf, who is actually leading the prayers.
मुझे बड़ी ही शदीद तकलीफ है और रंज भी है कि बगैर किसी तस्दीक के, बगैर किसी तहकीक के मेरे बारे में इतनी बड़ी बातें.
You can see his details, family details and everything over here.
According to a highly reliable Pakistan military source, the Indian DGMO sent a hotline message to his Pakistani counterpart justifying the actions of IAF as a preemptive strike on the terrorist camps and proposing further discussion on the issue. Pakistan's DGMO outrightly rejected the allegations and conveyed Pakistan's clear intent to retaliate at the time, place, and manner of its choosing. He further made it clear that any discussion would only take place after Pakistan had responded to the India's illegal and unprovoked aggression. It was clear that Indian strikes were more of a strategic, coercive signal. In particular, the choice to include 2 targets in cities Muridke and Bahawalpur in the Pakistani heartland of Punjab was a deliberate political signal. By targeting mosques, which are mostly vacant at night, India achieved nothing. Indian claim of surgical strikes also caused collateral damage and casualties of innocent civilians, especially in congested urban areas of Bahawalpur city. New red lines now crossed by India without achieving any substantive result. This was just to please its public and fulfilling the promise of revenge, as already discussed in the previous episode. Also, India was perhaps telegraphing its intent to keep the conflict contained and end at high note by declaring to achieve objectives. Now let's hear what the Indian Air Marshal A.K. Bharti said during the press conference after ceasefire.
We are in a combat scenario and losses are a part of combat. The question that you must ask us, have we achieved our objectives? And the answer is a thumping yes.
But the fact is very clear and starkly clear for the world that no objective was achieved by the Indians at all, because the targeted infrastructure had no linkage with the so-called terrorist infrastructure. What resulted in targeting those facilities was the death of innocent civilians and downing of Indian jets, along with Indian credibility.